What happens when humanity's greatest strength becomes the galaxy's last hope? When a routine rescue mission uncovers a secret so profound it threatens to reshape the entire cosmic order? In a universe where humanity is considered the weakest species, where our lack of natural weapons, psychic abilities, and advanced evolution makes us laughingstocks among the galactic community, one discovery will prove that sometimes the greatest power lies not in what evolution gave you, but in what you choose to become. This is the story of how a single human's compassion toward an alien child didn't just save a life, it ignited a revolution that would echo across star systems and redefine what it truly means to be strong. Prepare yourself for a journey where the underestimated become unstoppable, where kindness becomes a weapon more powerful than any plasma cannon, and where humanity's supposed weakness becomes the key to unlocking an ancient mystery that could either unite the galaxy or tear it apart forever. The mission was supposed to be simple. The discovery was anything but. Captain Elena Rodriguez had always believed that the universe had a twisted sense of humor. How else could you explain humanity's position in the Galactic Federation? Among species that could manipulate gravity with their thoughts, breathe in vacuum, or regenerate entire limbs, humans were considered barely more advanced than the primitive creatures they'd evolved from on their little blue world. The bridge of the UES determination hummed with the quiet efficiency that marked all human vessels. Unlike the bioorganic ships of the Zephyrians or the crystal matrix vessels of the Crystalline Collective, human ships were built with metal, sweat, and stubbornness. They weren't pretty, they weren't elegant, but they worked. That seemed to be humanity's motto in the galaxy: it's not pretty, but it works. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system, announced Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. It's coming from a Veltar merchant vessel. Elena raised an eyebrow. The Veltar were one of the more arrogant species in the Federation. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and the ability to survive in environments that would kill most other species instantly, they rarely needed assistance from anyone, let alone humans. What's their situation? Elena asked, settling back into her captain's chair. The worn leather had molded to her form over the past 5 years of deep space missions. Unclear, Captain. The message is fragmented, but it sounds like engine failure and possible hull breach. They're requesting immediate assistance. Morrison paused, checking his readings again. They specifically requested human assistance. That made Elena sit up straight. In her 15 years of service, she could count on one hand the number of times an alien species had specifically requested human help. Usually, they tolerated human assistance because the Federation mandated mutual aid, but they never asked for it. Plot a course for Kepler 442, maximum burn, Elena ordered. How long until we reach them? 18 hours at maximum acceleration, Captain. Make it 16. Chief Engineer, I need everything you can give me. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Chan's voice crackled through the comm system from the engine room. You'll have it, Captain. These engines were built to be pushed. As the determination changed course, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be a routine rescue mission. In her experience, nothing involving the Veltar was ever routine. The next 15 hours passed in the familiar rhythm of deep space travel. Elena used the time to review everything they knew about the Veltar. They were an ancient species, predating humanity's entry into the Federation by thousands of years. Their society was rigidly hierarchical, based on genetic perfection and natural ability. They viewed most other species as inferior, but they held a particular disdain for humans. According to the cultural briefings, the Veltar believed that evolution was a ladder, with species climbing toward perfection. Humans, in their view, had barely left the ground floor. They had no natural weapons, no psychic abilities, no enhanced physical capabilities. They were soft, weak, and died easily. What the Veltar couldn't understand was why the Federation had accepted humanity as a member species. Elena had heard all the jokes and insults over the years. Humans were called the maintenance crew of the galaxy because they were only good at fixing things. They were the janitors of space because they cleaned up everyone else's messes. But Elena had learned something during her years in space that the other species seemed to miss: sometimes the maintenance crew was exactly what you needed. Captain, we're approaching the distress signal, Morrison announced. Elena moved to the forward viewport and felt her breath catch. The Veltar vessel was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Determination. It hung in space like a wounded giant, dark against the starfield. Parts of its hull were twisted and torn, and she could see atmosphere venting from multiple breach points. "My God," whispered Dr. Maria Santos, the ship's chief medical officer, who had joined them on the bridge. "How are they still alive in there?" "Veltar physiology," Elena replied grimly. "They can survive in near vacuum conditions for extended periods. But even they have their limits." "Captain, I'm picking up life signs," reported Morrison. "Looks like maybe 30 to 40 individuals still alive aboard that ship." Elena nodded. "Assemble a rescue team. Full environmental suits, emergency medical equipment, and," Captain Morrison interrupted, his voice strange. "I'm reading something else. There's a smaller vessel attached to the Veltar ship. It looks like an escape pod, but the design is unlike anything in our databases." Elena studied the tactical display. The smaller vessel was sleek and organic-looking, almost grown rather than built. It pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow. Could it be a new Veltar design? "Negative, Captain. The material composition is completely different. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was alive." A chill ran down Elena's spine. In a galaxy full of strange species and impossible technologies, finding something truly unknown was rare and usually dangerous. "Change of plans," Elena announced. "I'm leading the rescue team personally. Morrison, you have the con. If anything goes wrong, pull back to safe distance and contact Federation Command." "Captain, regulations state that." "I know the regulations, Commander. I also know that sometimes regulations aren't enough." Elena was already moving toward the airlock. "Dr. Santos, you're with me. I have a feeling we're going to need medical expertise." The rescue team consisted of 6 people: Elena, Dr. Santos, Chief Chen, Security Officer Lieutenant Patricia Wong, and 2 junior technicians. They crossed the void between ships in silence, their magnetic boots clanking against the Determination's hull as they prepared to board the shuttle. The short journey to the Veltar vessel felt longer than usual. As they approached, Elena could see the extent of the damage more clearly. This wasn't just engine failure or a simple hull breach. The ship had been attacked. "Captain," Chen's voice crackled through the comb, "these blast patterns, they're not from any weapon I recognize." Elena studied the twisted metal and saw what Chen meant. The damage looked almost organic, as if something had eaten through the hull rather than blasted it. They docked with the Veltar ship's emergency airlock and began the careful process of boarding. Elena had been on Veltar vessels before, and they always made her feel claustrophobic. Built for beings nearly 3 meters tall, everything was oversized and intimidating. But this ship felt different. It felt afraid. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down the corridors as they made their way toward the bridge. The artificial gravity was fluctuating, making each step uncertain. Along the way, they found evidence of whatever had happened here. Blast marks on the walls, personal belongings scattered across the floor, and, in some places, what looked like claw marks gouged deep into the metal. "Captain, I'm reading life signs this way," Dr. Santos announced, pointing down a side corridor. They found the survivors huddled in what appeared to be the ship's medical bay. 12 Veltar, including what Elena assumed was their captain based on the elaborate armor and decorations. They were wounded but alive, tending to each other with the efficiency of a species that had faced danger before. The Veltar captain looked up as the rescue team entered. Elena had expected the usual mix of resignation and barely concealed disgust that the Veltar displayed when forced to accept human help. Instead, she saw something she had never seen in a Veltar's eyes before: genuine fear. "You came," the captain said in the universal standard language, his translator giving his words a mechanical quality. "I was not certain anyone would respond to our distress call." "Of course we came," Elena replied, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "What happened here?" The Veltar captain's mandibles clicked in what Elena knew was a sign of distress. "We were attacked by the Devourers. We had not seen them for over 3,000 years. We thought they were extinct." Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Santos. Neither of them had heard of any species called the Devourers. What are Devourers? Elena asked. The captain's four eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Ancient enemies. They consume everything organic, growing stronger with each victory. Our ancestors fought a great war against them millennia ago. We thought we had won. Apparently not, Chief Chen muttered, examining one of the wounded Veltar. Captain, Dr. Santos interrupted, we need to get these people medical attention. The Determination sick bay can accommodate Veltar physiology, but we need to move quickly. Elena nodded, but something was nagging at her. Captain, you said we found life signs indicating 30 to 40 individuals. I only count 12 here. The Veltar captain's expression grew even more troubled. The others, some died in the attack. Others were taken. Taken? The Devourers do not simply kill. They capture prisoners for purposes we do not fully understand. But there is something else. The captain gestured toward one of his subordinates, who brought forward a small bundle wrapped in what looked like emergency blankets. We found this among the wreckage of a Devourer scout ship that we managed to destroy before they overwhelmed us. It is not one of theirs. Elena approached cautiously as the bundle was unwrapped. Inside was a small form, roughly humanoid but clearly not human. It appeared to be a child, though of what species Elena couldn't tell. The being was unconscious, breathing shallowly, and covered in what looked like bioluminescent markings that pulsed weakly with each breath. We do not know what species this is, the Veltar captain continued. Our medical officers have never seen anything like it. But the Devourers were protecting it with their lives. Dr. Santos immediately knelt beside the small being, running her medical scanner over its form. Vital signs are weak but stable. The physiology is unlike anything in our medical databases. Elena stared at the unconscious child, feeling that chill in her spine growing stronger. Why would the Devourers protect a prisoner? That, said the Veltar captain, is what we need to find out. But, I warn you, human. This discovery may bring consequences none of us are prepared for. As if on cue, the ship's hull groaned ominously around them, and the emergency lights flickered. Through the damaged sections of the vessel, Elena thought she could see movement in the space beyond. Large, dark shapes moving with purpose. They have found us, the Veltar captain said quietly. The Devourers have come to reclaim what we took from them. Elena made a command decision that would change everything. Everyone, back to the Determination. Now. We're taking the child with us. Captain, Lieutenant Wang objected, that's an order, Lieutenant. Whatever this child is, the Devourers want it badly enough to track us across space. Which means we need to keep it away from them. As they evacuated the survivors and the mysterious child to the Determination, Elena couldn't help but feel that they had just stepped into something much larger than a simple rescue mission. The universe's sense of humor was showing again, and she had the distinct feeling that humanity was about to be thrust into the spotlight whether they wanted it or not. The child stirred briefly as they carried it aboard the Determination, and, for just a moment, Elena thought she saw its eyes open. They were unlike anything she had ever seen, ancient, intelligent, and holding depths that seemed to contain the wisdom of eons. Then, the moment passed, and they were running for their lives as dark shapes emerged from the void behind them, giving chase with a persistence that spoke of desperate need rather than simple predatory instinct. Whatever they had stumbled upon, Elena realized, was going to change everything. The routine mission was over. Now they had to figure out how to survive what came next. The Determination shuddered as another energy blast grazed her port shields. Elena gripped her command chair as the ship bucked and rolled, her crew working frantically to keep them ahead of their pursuers. How many ships are following us? She called out over the din of straining engines and warning alarms. I count at least 8 vessels, Captain Morrison reported, his hands flying across his console. They're unlike anything in our tactical database. Organic composition, highly maneuverable, and they're gaining on us. Elena studied the tactical display. The Devourer ships looked more grown than built, with flowing lines and what appeared to be breathing openings along their hulls. They moved through space with an unsettling grace, like predators that had evolved in the void itself. Chief Chen, how are our engines holding up? We're at maximum burn, Captain, but these old drives weren't designed for extended high-speed running. I can give you maybe another hour before we start risking catastrophic failure. Elena's mind raced. An hour wasn't nearly enough time to reach Federation space, and even if they could, she wasn't sure she wanted to lead these creatures to inhabited systems. Not until they understood what they were dealing with. Dr. Santos, Elena called through the comm system, how are our passengers? The Veltar are stable, Captain. Their natural physiology makes them remarkably resilient. But, the child. Santos paused. Captain, I need you to see this. Elena looked at Morrison. You have the con, Commander. Evasive maneuvers, keep us ahead of them, but don't wear out our engines. Elena made her way through the ship's corridors, noting how her human crew worked alongside the rescued Veltar with quiet efficiency. In an emergency, it seemed, species differences mattered less than survival. The Veltar, despite their usual arrogance, were actually helping with repairs and damage control without being asked. She found Dr. Santos in the medical bay, standing over the unconscious child with an expression of complete bewilderment. The small being lay on one of the biobeds, surrounded by monitoring equipment that was displaying readings unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Captain, Santos began without preamble, I've run every scan I can think of, and I still have no idea what this child is. The cellular structure is completely unknown, the neural patterns are off the charts, and the bioluminescent markings aren't just decorative, they're actually a complex network of what appears to be organic circuitry. Elena moved closer to examine the child. Up close, she could see that the being was roughly the size of a human 10-year-old, but the proportions were slightly off. The limbs were longer, the torso more compact, and the head larger in relation to the body. The skin had a faint translucent quality, and the glowing markings pulsed in complex patterns that seemed almost like a language. But, here's the really strange part, Santos continued. The child's DNA, if we can call it that, contains genetic markers from dozens of different species. Not just alien species, Captain. Every major spacefaring species in the galaxy, including humans. Elena felt her blood run cold. That's impossible. Humans have only been in space for a few centuries. How could this child have human genetic markers? I don't know. But, there's more. Santos gestured to another display. The child's brain activity suggests it's not truly unconscious. It's in some kind of meditative state, and I'm detecting what might be telepathic emanations. Telepathic? Low level, but definitely present. And, Captain, those emanations seem to be responding to our presence. Specifically, to human presence. Before Elena could respond, the ship shook again, more violently this time. The lights flickered and several alarms began blaring at once. Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system. Captain, to the bridge, immediately. Elena ran through the corridors, reaching the bridge to find controlled chaos. Half the displays were showing damage reports while the other half tracked their pursuers. Report, Elena snapped. They've changed tactics, Captain. Instead of just chasing us, they're trying to hurt us. Look at this. Morrison highlighted the tactical display. They've split into 3 groups. One group is still behind us, but the other 2 are moving to flank us. At their current speed, they'll have us surrounded in 30 minutes. Elena studied the display, her tactical training taking over. The Devourers were working together with a coordination that suggested either a hive mind or incredibly advanced communication. Either way, it meant they were dealing with an intelligence far more sophisticated than a simple predatory species. Options? We could try to punch through their formation, but we'd have to fight our way out. Or... Morrison hesitated. Or what, Commander? There's an asteroid field ahead, about 20 minutes at current speed. We might be able to lose them in there, but it's risky. The field is dense, and our sensors won't work as well. What about their sensors? Unknown, Captain. But if their ships are as organic as they appear, they might rely more on biological senses than electronic ones. Elena considered their options. Fighting was unlikely to succeed, the Devourers outnumbered them and their ships appeared more advanced. Running wasn't working either. That left hiding. Set course for the asteroid field. And, Chief Chen? Yes, Captain? I need you to rig the ship for silent running. Minimum power, minimal heat signature. Make us as invisible as possible. You got it, Captain. As the determination changed course toward the asteroid field, Elena noticed something odd. The child in the medical bay, even unconscious, it seemed to be affecting the crew. The rescued Veltar were working with unprecedented cooperation, the human crew was performing beyond their usual standards, and even the ship's systems seemed to be running more efficiently. Morrison, are you noticing anything unusual about crew performance? Morrison looked up from his console, a puzzled expression on his face. Now that you mention it, yes. Everyone seems more focused, more coordinated. Even the Veltar are acting like they're part of the crew instead of just passengers. Elena was about to respond when Dr. Santos' voice came through the comm system. Captain, you need to get down here. The child is waking up. Elena hesitated. The asteroid field was only minutes away, and they needed all hands for the tricky navigation. But something told her that what was happening in the medical bay might be more important than tactical maneuvering. Morrison, take us into the field. Use the asteroids for cover and find us a place to hide. I'll be back as soon as I can. Elena arrived at the medical bay to find Dr. Santos and the Veltar captain standing over the child's bed. The small being's eyes were open now, and Elena could see that they were unlike anything in her experience. They seemed to contain swirling galaxies, ancient and knowing. Captain, the Veltar said quietly, I believe we may have made a grave error. The child turned its head toward Elena, and, when their eyes met, she felt something shift in her mind. Not an invasion or attack, but a gentle presence that seemed to be trying to communicate. Images flashed through Elena's consciousness. Ancient civilizations rising and falling across the galaxy. A golden age when dozens of species worked together in harmony. And, then, darkness. War. The rise of something called the Devourers, but not as she had imagined them. The images showed the Devourers not as mindless destroyers, but as servants. They were the military arm of a vast empire ruled by beings of incredible power and intelligence. Beings who looked remarkably similar to the child lying before them. Elena gasped as the implications hit her. You're not a prisoner, she whispered to the child. You're one of them. You're their ruler. The child nodded slightly, and Elena heard a voice in her mind. Not threatening, but infinitely sad. I am Zarathul, last of the Eternal Ones. The beings you call Devourers were once our servants, our protectors. But something went wrong. They became corrupted, consumed by the very hunger they were designed to control. They destroyed my people, all except me, but why were they protecting you? Elena asked aloud. They were not protecting me, the voice continued. They were bringing me home. To the place where my people first awakened. To the source of our power, Dr. Santos stepped forward. Captain, the child's vital signs are spiking. Whatever's happening, it's putting enormous strain on its system. Elena looked into those ancient eyes and saw something that made her heart ache. Loneliness. This child, this last member of an ancient species, was completely alone in the universe. But I am not alone anymore, the voice whispered in her mind. You came for me. Humans. The one species my people never encountered before the corruption took hold, Elena felt a chill. What do you mean? Images flashed again. The Eternal Ones in their prime, cataloging and studying every species in the galaxy. But, no humans. Humanity hadn't even evolved yet when the Eternal Ones fell. That is why the genetic markers exist in me, Zarathul explained. My people's final act before they fell was to encode the potential for every known species into my genetic structure. They hoped that someday, someone would be able to help me restore what was lost. But, they never knew about humans, Elena began to understand. We're the variable they didn't account for. Yes. And, perhaps that is why you were able to resist the corruption that took the others. You have no genetic memory of serving the Eternal Ones. You choose to help out of compassion, not programming. The ship shuddered around them as Morrison navigated deeper into the asteroid field. Elena could hear the engine straining and the hull creaking as they weaved between massive chunks of rock and ice. Captain, Morrison's voice came through the calm, tight with stress. We're deep in the field now, but I'm still reading Pursuit. These things don't seem to have any trouble navigating in here. Elena looked at Zarathul. Can you control them? The Devourers? I can try. But the corruption runs deep. They have been without proper guidance for millennia. They may not remember how to obey. Elena made another command decision. Try. Please. We'll protect you while you do. Zarathul closed its eyes, and Elena felt a wave of power emanate from the small form. The bioluminescent markings on the child's skin blazed with light, and every piece of equipment in the medical bay began behaving strangely. Displays flickered, readings spiked, and Elena could swear she heard something like music coming from the ship's systems. On the bridge, Morrison was experiencing similar phenomena. Captain, all our instruments are going crazy. But, Captain, the Devourers, they've stopped. They're just floating out there. Elena felt hope building in her chest. Maybe they could resolve this peacefully. But then, Zarathul's eyes snapped open, filled with pain and sorrow. I cannot control them all. The voice whispered. Some remember their purpose, but others are too far gone. They fight against my influence. And, worse, there are others coming. The corruption has spread beyond just the Devourers. Elena felt her hope crashing down. What others? Species that served my people willingly in the old days. They were changed by proximity to Eternal One technology. Made dependent on it. When my people fell, they should have been freed. Instead, they became addicted to the power. They have been searching for me for 3,000 years. Elena understood. This wasn't just about rescuing a child or evading some mysterious attackers. This was about preventing the resurrection of a galactic empire that had fallen for good reason. How many species are we talking about? 12 major spacefaring civilizations. Hundreds of minor ones. If they find me and force me to restore the old order, the galaxy will burn. They remember only the power, not the wisdom that was meant to guide it. Elena looked at the child, this ancient being trapped in a young form, carrying the weight of an entire galactic civilization on its shoulders. And she made a decision that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Then, we won't let them find you. Humanity will protect you. Zarathul stared at her in amazement. You would do this? Risk your entire species for someone you barely know. Elena smiled, thinking of all the times humanity had been dismissed as weak and insignificant. That's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's not about power or genetic programming. It's about choosing to do what's right. The ship shuddered again, and Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. Captain, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures approaching the system. Whatever's coming, it's big. Elena looked at Zarathul, who nodded gravely. They have found us. The servitor fleet's approach. You should run, Captain Rodriguez. Take your people and flee while you still can. Elena shook her head. We're not running. Dr. Santos, get Zarathul secured for combat maneuvers. Morrison, she called through the calm, prepare for battle. And send a priority message to Federation Command. Tell them we need immediate assistance. Captain Zarathul's voice was filled with concern. You do not understand the forces that approach. The servitor fleet's command power beyond your imagination. Elena headed for the bridge, pausing at the doorway to look back at the ancient child. Maybe. But they're about to learn something about humanity that even you don't know yet. What is that? Elena smiled grimly. We may not be the strongest, or the fastest, or the most advanced. But, when we decide to protect something, we don't give up. Ever. And, we have this annoying habit of finding ways to win fights we shouldn't be able to win. As Elena reached the bridge and settled into her command chair, she could see the first of the servitor fleet ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. They were massive, dwarfing even the largest Federation vessels, and they moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. "Captain," Morrison said quietly, "there are at least 50 ships out there, and more arriving every minute." Elena studied the tactical display, her mind already working on strategies that might give them a chance. "Then, we better get creative. Chief Chen, I need you to work some magic with our engines. Dr. Santos, see if Sarathol can give us any tactical information about those ships. Morrison, get me a comm channel to the lead vessel." "Captain, are you going to try to negotiate?" Elena shook her head. "I'm going to do something much more dangerous. I'm going to introduce them to human stubbornness." The communications channel crackled to life, filled with static and what sounded like harmonics beyond human hearing. When the voice finally came through, it carried the weight of eons and the arrogance of absolute power. "Small vessel. You carry what belongs to us. Surrender the last one, and your deaths will be swift." Elena straightened in her command chair, feeling the eyes of her entire crew upon her. Through the bridge's viewport, she could see the massive servitor fleet ships arranging themselves in a perfect formation around the asteroid field. They moved with mechanical precision, their hulls gleaming with an inner light that spoke of technologies humanity couldn't even begin to understand. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earthship Determination, representing the Terran Federation and the Galactic Alliance. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." A sound that might have been laughter came through the channel, but it held no warmth. "Do not attempt deception, human. We know the last one is aboard your vessel. Our sensors detect the unique resonance signature. You cannot hide from us." Elena caught Morrison's eye and gestured for him to mute the channel temporarily. "How much time until Federation reinforcements arrive?" "Best case scenario, Captain? 18 hours. Worst case, they might not come at all. Command might decide that one ship isn't worth starting a war with an unknown alien fleet." Elena nodded grimly. She had expected as much. Humanity was still the new kid in the galactic community, and they picked their battles carefully. Especially battles they couldn't win. She reactivated the communications channel. "I'm curious about something. You call this being the last one. What makes you think you have any claim to a living being? You understand nothing, primitive creature. The last one is the key to our ascension. For 3 millennia, we have searched the galaxy for the heir to the eternal throne. Now that we have found them, no force in the universe will prevent us from claiming our birthright." Elena felt a chill at the certainty in that voice. These weren't raiders or pirates. These were zealots, and zealots were always the most dangerous enemies. "And what exactly is this birthright?" "The last one carries within their genetic structure the complete technological and biological legacy of the Eternal Ones. With proper guidance, they can restore the great civilization that once brought order to this chaotic galaxy. We will be their servants, their chosen people, elevated above all other species." Elena exchanged glances with the Veltar captain, who had joined them on the bridge. The tall alien's 4 eyes were wide with what Elena was beginning to recognize as fear. "Captain Rodriguez," the Veltar said quietly, "what they describe, it would mean the enslavement of every species in the galaxy. The Eternal Ones rule through absolute control. Their servants were not elevated, they were transformed into extensions of the eternal will." Elena nodded, then spoke into the calm again. "And what if the last one doesn't want to restore this empire? What if they choose a different path?" The silence that followed was longer this time, and, when the voice returned, it carried a note of genuine confusion. "Want? Choose? These concepts are irrelevant. The last one will fulfill their purpose because it is their nature. Just as it is the nature of fire to burn or water to flow." Elena realized she was dealing with beings who literally couldn't comprehend the concept of free will. To them, everyone and everything had a predetermined purpose, and questioning that purpose was unthinkable. "Well," Elena said, settling back in her chair, "you're about to learn something new about humans. We have this annoying tendency to want things that go against our nature. Like right now, I want to protect someone I barely know from beings who could probably destroy my ship with a thought. Doesn't make much sense, does it? Another pause. You would sacrifice your crew for a being not of your species? If that's what it takes, yes. This is illogical. Humans gain nothing from this sacrifice. Elena smiled. That's where you're wrong. We gain something invaluable. We get to sleep at night knowing we did the right thing. The communication channel went dead, and Elena knew the talking was over. All hands, this is the captain, Elena announced over the ship-wide comm. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be in the fight of our lives. I won't lie to you, we're outnumbered at least 50 to 1, and our enemies have technology that makes ours look like stone knives and bearskins. She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew's faces. She saw fear there, but also determination. But here's the thing about humans that these aliens don't understand. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because it's the right thing to do. Today, we're standing between a child and those who would use the child to enslave the galaxy. I can't think of a better cause to fight for. Elena switched to a private channel with Dr. Santos. Maria, how is Zarathul holding up? Stable, but I can tell this is taking a tremendous toll. Captain, the child keeps asking me to tell you that you don't have to do this. It says it would rather die than see your crew sacrificed for its sake. Elena felt her heart clench. Even facing the prospect of death, the ancient child was thinking of others. Tell Zarathul that humans don't abandon family. And, right now, they're family. Before Santos could respond, every system on the ship screened warnings as the servitor fleet opened fire. The asteroid field lit up like a star-going nova as energy beams that could vaporize planets carved through space. Elena felt the determination buck and roll as Morrison threw the ship into a wild evasive pattern, using the asteroids as cover. Damage report. Elena shouted over the din of alarms. Forward shields down to 60%. Chief Chen's voice crackled through the calm from the engine room. But, Captain, these asteroids are providing better protection than I expected. Their mineral composition is scattering the enemy weapons. Elena studied the tactical display with new eyes. The asteroids weren't just providing cover, they were actively interfering with the servitor weapons. Morrison, can you map the mineral composition of the asteroids? Working on it, Captain. Looks like heavy concentrations of, wait, this is strange. The asteroids aren't natural. They're artificial, made from some kind of crystalline matrix I've never seen before. Elena felt a spark of hope. Zarathul, she called through the comm to the medical bay, are these asteroids connected to your people? The child's voice came back, weak but clear. Asterisk yes. This was once a research station of my people. When they fell, the automated systems began breaking down the station and reforming it into a defensive barrier. The crystals are designed to interfere with Eternal One technology, asterisk Elena grinned fiercely. Then, we're fighting on our home field, people. Morrison, I need you to plot a course that keeps us in the densest part of the asteroid field. Chief Chen, reroute all available power to engines and weapons. We're not just running anymore, we're fighting. The next hour was a nightmare of narrow escapes and impossible maneuvers. The determination danced through the asteroid field like a leaf in a hurricane, sometimes passing between massive chunks of crystal with only meters to spare. Behind them, the servitor ships followed with methodical persistence, their superior firepower partially negated by the interference from the ancient crystals. Elena lost count of how many times they should have died. A beam that would have cut them in half passed harmlessly through a crystal formation and emerged as scattered light. Missiles that should have tracked their heat signature spun wildly off course, confused by the exotic radiation given off by the artificial asteroids. But the determination was taking a beating. Systems failed and were jury-rigged back to life. Hull plating was vaporized and emergency force fields snapped into place. The crew worked with the focused intensity of people who knew they were living on borrowed time. Captain, Morrison called out, I'm reading something on long-range sensors. Multiple ships approaching at high speed. Elena felt her heart sink. More enemies were the last thing they needed. But, then, Morrison's voice cracked with excitement. Captain, They're Federation vessels. The entire Third Fleet is dropping out of hyperspace. Elena watched in amazement as ship after ship materialized at the edge of the system. Human vessels, yes, but also ships from a dozen other Federation species. The elegant bioships of the Zephyrians, the crystal matrices of the Crystalline Collective, even the massive dreadnoughts of the usually peaceful Benthians. All ships, this is Admiral Zhang of the Federation Third Fleet, a voice crackled through the comm. Captain Rodriguez, we received your message. Sorry we're late to the party. Elena had never been happier to hear another human voice. Admiral, we're protecting a being that these aliens want to use to restart an ancient empire. We can't let them already briefed, Captain. Federation Command has declared this a Code 7 scenario. We're authorized to use any force necessary to prevent galactic enslavement. Elena looked at the tactical display. The odds were still against them, the servitor fleet was massive, but at least now they had a fighting chance. The battle that followed would be remembered as one of the most decisive in galactic history, though few would ever know the full truth of what they were fighting for. The Federation fleet engaged the servitor ships in the open space beyond the asteroid field, and Elena watched in awe as technologies from dozens of different species were coordinated into a unified assault. Human tactical doctrine provided the strategy, Zephyrian bioships delivered precision strikes, crystalline vessels provided energy screens that deflected return fire, and Benthian dreadnoughts hammered away at the largest enemy ships with weapons that could crack moons. But it was the diversity of the Federation fleet that truly made the difference. The servitor ships were designed to fight enemies using Eternal One technology or variations of it. They had no experience dealing with the chaotic mix of completely different technological approaches that characterized the Federation. Captain, Zarathal's voice came through the calm, stronger now, your fleet is winning, but at great cost. Many ships are being destroyed. Elena watched the tactical display with growing unease. The Federation was winning, but barely. Ships were dying with every passing minute, and she could see that the servitor fleet was beginning to adapt to their tactics. Is there another way? Elena asked. Some way to end this without more deaths? There is. But it would require great trust between us. Elena didn't hesitate. Tell me. I can use the ancient systems in these asteroids to send a message to every servitor ship at once. I can show them what truly happened to my people, why the empire fell. But, to do so, I would need to use you as a conduit. Your mind would be connected to mine during the transmission. Elena felt a chill. Mind linking with an alien being was dangerous under the best circumstances. With one as powerful as Zarathal, it could mean her death. What are the risks? Your consciousness could be overwhelmed by the memories I carry. You could lose yourself in the experiences of an entire civilization. Or, the voice paused, you could help me carry this burden. Share it, so that neither of us bears it alone. Elena looked around the bridge at her crew, all of them working desperately to keep the ship alive while the battle raged around them. She thought of all the Federation ships dying in space, their crews sacrificing themselves for a cause they barely understood. Do it! Elena felt the world shift around her as Zarathal's consciousness touched hers. Suddenly, she was experiencing memories that spanned millennia, seeing the rise and fall of a civilization from the perspective of its last surviving member. She saw the Eternal Ones at their peak, beings of incredible wisdom and power who genuinely sought to bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy. She saw them create servant races, not as slaves but as partners in their grand design. She saw technologies that could reshape worlds and heal entire species. But she also saw how power corrupted, even with the best intentions. The Eternal Ones became convinced that they alone knew what was best for the galaxy. Their servants became more dependent, less capable of independent thought. Diversity was discouraged in favor of unity. Freedom was sacrificed for order. And, finally, she saw the corruption take hold. The technology itself became addictive, changing those who used it. The servants became zealots, the Eternal Ones became tyrants, and the galaxy began to burn. Elena felt Zarathal's grief and guilt as if it were her own. This child had witnessed the destruction of everything it had ever known, and had spent 3,000 years alone with the knowledge that it could either restore the empire that had destroyed itself or let the memory of its people fade forever. Now you understand, asterisk Zarathul whispered in her mind. Asterisk this is the choice I face. Restore the Empire and watch history repeat itself, or remain alone forever while the galaxy fragments into chaos. Asterisk Elena felt the weight of that choice, but she also felt something else. Hope. There's a third option, she said, both aloud and in her mind. You don't have to choose between tyranny and isolation. You can choose to grow, to learn, to become something new. What do you mean? Asterisk Elena thought of her crew working together, of the Federation fleet with all its diverse species fighting as one, of humanity's long journey from a tribal species to citizens of the galaxy. You can choose to become part of something instead of ruling over it. The Federation isn't perfect, but it's built on the idea that every species brings something valuable to the table. You could help us become better instead of trying to make us obedient. Elena felt Zarathul's amazement at the concept. Asterisk you would accept me? Even knowing what I am, what I could become, asterisk that's what family does. They accept you as you are and help you become who you want to be. Elena felt the ancient child's decision crystallize, and together they reached out through the asteroid field's crystalline network. The message they sent to the servitor fleet wasn't one of commands or promises of power. It was the simple truth of what the Eternal Empire had become and an invitation to choose a different path. The effect was immediate. Across space, servitor ships began to slow their attacks. Some broke off entirely, their crews overwhelmed by the revelation that their entire purpose had been built on a lie. Others simply shut down, their captains unable to process the reality that their gods had been fallible. Elena opened her eyes to find herself back on the bridge of the determination, with Zarathul's presence still warm in her mind but separate from her own thoughts. Captain, Morrison reported, his voice filled with wonder, the enemy fleet is standing down. Most of them are requesting permission to communicate with Federation Command. Elena smiled, feeling exhausted but triumphant. Grant their requests. And, Morrison? Send a message to Admiral Zhang. Tell him we have a new potential member species to discuss. Through their mental link, Elena felt Zarathul's confusion. Asterisk member species? But, I am only one individual. Asterisk Elena looked at the child who carried the genetic legacy of dozens of species, who possessed technologies beyond imagination, and who had just chosen cooperation over domination. You're right, you're only one individual. But, so was every other person who ever changed the galaxy. The question isn't what you are, Zarathul. The question is what you choose to become. As the determination limped out of the asteroid field, escorted by the Federation fleet and followed by former enemy ships now seeking asylum, Elena realized that humanity had just gained something more valuable than military victory. They had gained a family member who would help them grow into something greater than they had ever imagined possible. The mission was supposed to be routine. Instead, it had become the first day of a new age. 6 months after the Battle of the Crystal Field, as historians would later call it, Elena found herself in a situation she had never imagined possible. She was standing in the observation deck of Unity Station, the Federation's newest and most advanced diplomatic facility, watching humanity's most unlikely ambassador prepare for what could be the most important negotiation in galactic history. Zarathul had grown, not physically but in ways that mattered more. The ancient consciousness that had once carried the weight of an entire fallen civilization alone now moved with the confidence of someone who belonged somewhere. The bioluminescent markings on their skin pulsed with patterns that Elena had learned to recognize as contentment, though their meaning remained deeper and more complex than human emotions. Captain Rodriguez, came a familiar voice behind her. Elena turned to see Admiral Zhang approaching, his expression troubled. Admiral. I take it the council session didn't go well. Zhang shook his head. 3 species have threatened to withdraw from the Federation if we proceed with Zarathul's proposal. The hegemony representatives are calling it dangerous idealism that will destroy galactic stability. And, honestly, Elena, I'm not sure they're wrong. Elena looked back through the observation window at Zarathul, who was currently engaged in what appeared to be an animated discussion with representatives from 17 different species. Even through the reinforced glass, she could see the young beings' excitement as they shared ideas and concepts that had been locked away for millennia. What exactly are they afraid of, Admiral? The same thing that scares me. Zarathul isn't just proposing new technologies or trade agreements. They're proposing a fundamental restructuring of how species interact across the galaxy. Shared consciousness networks, technological integration at the genetic level, the dissolution of traditional species boundaries. Elena nodded. She had been present for several of Zarathul's presentations to the council, and she understood the fear. The young being wasn't just offering to share their people's technology, they were proposing a path toward a truly unified galactic civilization. And the former servitor species? How are they adapting? That's actually the bright spot in all this. The rehabilitation programs are exceeding all expectations. Turns out that once they were freed from their obsession with restoring the Eternal Empire, most of them are remarkably adaptable. The Kethvar have become some of our best engineers, the Velnari are revolutionizing medical technology, and the Mordun. Zhang paused, a slight smile crossing his face. The Mordun have developed an inexplicable fascination with human cuisine. 3 of their ships have requested permission to establish restaurants on Earth. Elena laughed. I never would have expected that. Neither did anyone else. But that's what makes me think Zarathul might be right about this whole Unity project. When we stop seeing each other as separate species competing for resources and start seeing each other as individuals with different strengths, amazing things happen. Elena's expression grew serious. But, you're still worried. I'm terrified, Zhang admitted. Because what Zarathul is proposing worked before, Elena. The Eternal Empire brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy for thousands of years. But it also led to stagnation, dependence, and, ultimately, corruption. How do we know this time will be different? Elena was about to answer when an alarm sounded throughout the station. Not the harsh klaxon of a combat alert, but the deep, resonant tone that meant incoming priority communication. All senior staff to the command center, came the announcement. Priority Alpha message from deep space. Elena and Zhang exchanged glances and headed for the command center. They found it buzzing with activity as communications officers worked to clean up a signal that was obviously coming from very far away. Report, Zhang ordered. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, the station's communications officer, looked up from her console with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from beyond the galactic rim. The signal is incredibly weak, but it's definitely artificial. And, sir, the transmission protocols, they're similar to Eternal One technology. Elena felt her blood run cold. How similar? Nearly identical, Captain. Which should be impossible. According to everything we know, the Eternal Ones never established any colonies outside this galaxy. Zhang was already moving toward the main display. Can you clean up the signal enough for translation? Working on it, Admiral. But, sir, there's something else. The signal isn't a general broadcast. It's specifically directed at Unity Station. Someone out there knows we're here. Elena watched as the technical crew worked to process the transmission. Around the command center, representatives from dozens of species watched with growing concern. If there were more Eternal Ones out there, or worse, if there were other species with similar technology. Got it, Kim announced. Displaying translation now. The main screen flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a humanoid figure, though the image quality was too poor to make out details. When it spoke, the voice was transmitted in Universal Standard, but with an accent Elena had never heard before. Greetings to the inhabitants of the galaxy designated as Spiral 7. I am Speaker Valdris of the Eternal Communion, representing the survivors of the great catastrophe that befell our people 3 millennia ago. Elena felt Zarathul's consciousness touch her mind across the distance. Even through their connection, she could sense the young being's shock and confusion. The transmission continued. We have been watching your recent activities with great interest. The awakening of the last heir, the integration of the servitor species, and the attempts at technological unity all mirror events that occurred in our own galaxy following our exodus. Multiple galaxies, Zhang muttered. How many civilizations are out there? We come now with a warning and an offer. The path you are beginning to walk is fraught with dangers you do not yet comprehend. We have walked this path before, and we have seen where it leads. Accept our guidance, and we will help you avoid the mistakes that cost us our original home. Refuse, and you will repeat the cycle of rise and fall that has claimed 17 galaxies before you. The transmission cut to static, and the command center fell silent. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her. Fear, uncertainty, and growing panic were visible across multiple species' expressions. The representatives who had been arguing against Zarathal's proposals suddenly looked vindicated, while those who had supported unity appeared shaken. 17 galaxies, someone whispered. They're saying this has happened 17 times before. Elena made a decision that would define humanity's role in what was to come. She activated the station-wide communication system. All personnel, this is Captain Rodriguez. I know what we just heard is frightening. The idea that we're repeating a pattern that has failed before, potentially multiple times, is enough to make anyone want to retreat to the safety of isolation. She paused, looking directly at the camera that would broadcast her words throughout the station. But here's what I want everyone to remember. Every single time in human history that someone has told us something was impossible, we found a way to do it anyway. We were told we'd never fly, never reach space, never be accepted as equals in a galaxy full of species that seemed superior to us in every way. And every time, we proved them wrong. Elena could see that her words were having an effect. Straightened shoulders, raised chins, the subtle shift in posture that meant people were choosing hope over fear. Now these eternal communion people are telling us that unity is impossible, that we're doomed to repeat the failures of the past. But they're making one crucial mistake. They're assuming that we're the same as everyone who came before. Elena gestured toward the observation window where Zarathal could still be seen, now surrounded by an even larger group of representatives. That young being in there carries the genetic legacy of dozens of species and the memories of a fallen civilization. They could have chosen to restore the old empire, to rule over us as their ancestors did. Instead, they chose to become part of something new. They chose to be our family. Elena's voice grew stronger. And that's what makes this time different. We're not trying to create unity through domination or technological dependence. We're creating it through choice, through cooperation, through the simple recognition that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. Elena looked directly into the camera. So when these eternal communion representatives arrive, and they will arrive, we're going to show them something they've apparently never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when free beings choose to work together not because they have to, but because they want to. The command center erupted in discussion as representatives began debating Elena's words. But Zhang caught her arm as she prepared to leave. Elena, I hope you're right. But what if we're wrong? What if this really is a cycle that can't be broken? Elena looked out at the stars beyond the station's viewports. Then, at least we'll fail trying to do the right thing. And, sometimes, that's all you can do. Over the following weeks, Unity Station became the center of frantic activity as the Federation prepared for first contact with the Eternal Communion. Ships arrived daily, bringing diplomats, scientists, military advisors, and cultural specialists from across known space. Elena found herself appointed as humanity's primary liaison, a role that put her at the center of debates that would shape the future of galactic civilization. But it was her continued connection to Zarathal that provided the most valuable insights. The memories are fragmentary, Zarathal explained during one of their private conversations, but I can sense echoes of what my people experienced when they encountered the communion before. It wasn't conquest in the traditional sense. It was absorption. Elena leaned forward in her chair. They were in Zarathal's quarters, a space that had been designed to accommodate the young being's unique physiology and the various technological interfaces they required. What do you mean by absorption? The communion doesn't destroy civilizations or force them into submission. They offer perfection. Complete technological integration, shared consciousness across species lines, the elimination of conflict through the elimination of individuality. Elena felt a chill. And it worked? For a time. The civilizations that joined them achieved unprecedented prosperity and peace. But they also ceased to grow, to change, to surprise themselves. They became perfect, and, in becoming perfect, they became static. Elena nodded slowly. And static systems eventually collapse. Exactly. The communion represents the ultimate expression of order, but order without chaos cannot evolve. When challenges arose that required new solutions, the absorbed civilizations had lost the ability to adapt. Elena stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the diverse collection of ships that made up the Federation fleet. Each one was different, representing unique approaches to the challenges of space travel and survival. So our diversity isn't a weakness they need to fix. It's the very thing that makes us capable of survival. That is what I believe. But, Captain, the Communion has had 3,000 years to perfect their approach. When they arrive, they will not come as conquerors. They will come as saviors, offering solutions to every problem the Federation faces. Elena turned back to Zarathul. And those solutions will work, won't they? They will work perfectly. That is what makes them so dangerous. Elena was contemplating the implications when her communicator chimed. Admiral Zhang's voice crackled through the speaker. Elena, we need you in the command center immediately. They're here. Elena and Zarathul rushed to the command center to find organized chaos. Every screen showed the same impossible sight, a structure that dwarfed anything Elena had ever seen. It wasn't quite a ship, wasn't quite a space station, but something that seemed to blend the characteristics of both. How big is that thing? Elena breathed. Approximately 1,200 kilometers in length, Lieutenant Commander Kim reported. But, Captain, that's not the strangest part. The structure appears to be partially organic, partially technological, and partially something we can't identify. Elena stared at the readings. Partially something we can't identify? The sensor returns suggest sections that exist in normal spacetime but also extend into dimensions we don't have instruments to measure. Zarathul moved to one of the auxiliary stations, their bioluminescent markings pulsing rapidly as they interfaced with the Federation's computers. It is as I remembered, they said quietly. The Communion doesn't just build ships, they grow them. And they don't just exist in three-dimensional space, they exist across multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Elena was trying to process this information when the main communication board lit up with an incoming transmission. This is Unity Station responding to Eternal Communion Vessel, Zhang announced. Welcome to Federation Space. The response came immediately, and Elena felt her perception of the situation shift as soon as the voice began speaking. Greetings, children of Spiral 7. I am Conductor Seraph of the Eternal Communion. We bring you the gift of guidance and the promise of true peace. Elena had expected arrogance, condescension, or threats. Instead, the voice carried genuine warmth and compassion. When the visual transmission activated, she saw why. The figure on the screen appeared to be a fusion of multiple species, but not in the grotesque way she might have imagined. Instead, it was beautiful, combining the best aesthetic qualities of dozens of different evolutionary paths into something that seemed almost divine. We know you have questions, Conductor Seraph continued, and we know you have fears. This is natural. Every civilization we have encountered has experienced the same concerns when first offered the opportunity to join the greater unity. Elena noticed that other beings moved in the background of the transmission. Each one appeared to be a perfect fusion of multiple species, and all of them radiated the same sense of benevolent authority. We do not come as conquerors or rulers. We come as elder siblings, offering to share the wisdom we have gained through the integration of 437 distinct species across 18 galaxies. Elena felt her heart sink. Not 17 galaxies as they had initially claimed 18. Which meant they had successfully absorbed at least one more entire galactic civilization since their original transmission. We offer you the end of want, the end of conflict, the end of the isolation that keeps your species separated from their true potential. Join with us, and you will become more than you ever dreamed possible. The transmission paused, and Elena realized that Conductor Seraph was looking directly at her through the screen. Captain Rodriguez, we are particularly interested in speaking with you and the last heir. You have begun something remarkable here, but, without proper guidance, your efforts will end in the same tragedy that has befallen so many others. Allow us to help you achieve the unity you seek without the suffering that would otherwise be inevitable. Elena felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Everything the conductor said made sense. If they really had successfully integrated hundreds of species across multiple galaxies, they would certainly know how to avoid the pitfalls that had destroyed previous attempts at unity. But she also remembered Zarathal's words about perfection and stagnation. And she remembered humanity's long history of choosing difficult freedom over comfortable servitude. Elena stepped forward, activating the return transmission. Conductor Seraph, we appreciate your offer and your concern for our welfare. But, before we consider any form of integration, we would like to learn more about the civilizations you've helped. Would it be possible for us to communicate directly with representatives from some of the species that have joined your communion? Elena saw something flicker across Conductor Seraph's perfect features. It was only for a moment, but she could swear she saw surprise, and perhaps something else. That is, an unusual request, Captain Rodriguez. The species within our communion have transcended the need for individual representation. We speak for all of them, as they speak through us. Elena felt her suspicions crystallize. So there are no individual representatives? No separate governments or cultural institutions? Such divisions are relics of less evolved societies. Within the communion, all voices are heard because all voices are unified. Elena looked around the command center at the representatives from dozens of Federation species, all of them maintaining their distinct appearances, cultures, and perspectives even as they worked together. Thank you for the clarification, Conductor Seraph. We'll need some time to discuss your offer among ourselves. Of course, Captain. We will remain in your system for as long as necessary. But do not take too long to decide. The forces of chaos and entropy do not wait for lengthy deliberations. The transmission ended, and the command center fell silent. Elena looked at the faces around her and saw her own realization reflected back. They had just been presented with the most seductive threat they had ever faced. Not conquest, but the promise of perfection. Not slavery, but the offer of comfortable absorption into something greater. And the most dangerous part was that it might actually work. Elena took a deep breath and prepared to address the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced, learning how to say no to paradise. The debate had been raging for 72 hours straight, and Elena could see the strain on every face in the Federation Council chambers. Representatives from 43 species argued, pleaded, and demanded, their voices creating a cacophony that would have been chaos if not for the universal translators that somehow made sense of it all. The Communion offers us everything we have ever dreamed of, Ambassador Viridian of the Altarian Republic was saying, her crystalline form shimmering with agitation. No more wars, no more resource conflicts, no more misunderstandings between species. How can we even consider refusing such a gift? Elena watched from her position as humanity's representative, feeling the weight of the moment. Around the chamber, she could see the fear and hope warring in alien eyes. The Communion's massive vessel hung in space just outside the system, a constant reminder of the choice they faced. Because it is not a gift, replied Zarathal, their young voice carrying the authority of their ancient memories. It is the end of everything that makes us who we are. I have seen the fragments of what my people chose when faced with this same decision. They chose perfection, and it destroyed them. High Counselor Brentar of the Veltar spoke next, his massive form imposing even in the diplomatic setting. But, young heir, your people felt a corruption and internal strife. The Communion offers a way to avoid that fate. Elena stood, feeling the moment when she needed to speak. With respect, High Counselor, avoiding one fate by accepting another isn't necessarily wisdom. It's just choosing a different way to die. The chamber fell silent. Elena looked around at the faces watching her, some alien, some human, all of them struggling with the same question: what did it mean to be free? I've been thinking about humanity's history, Elena continued, and I realized that we've faced this choice before, in different forms. Every generation of humans has had to decide whether to accept the safety of conformity or embrace the danger of being different. Elena activated the chamber's holographic display, showing historical images from Earth. We've been offered paradise before. Safe societies where everyone had their place and no one had to struggle. And every time, some humans chose to leave, to explore, to risk everything for the chance to become something new. The images shifted, showing humanity's expansion into space, their first contacts with alien species, their gradual acceptance into the galactic community despite being considered inferior. The thing is, we never became stronger by accepting limitations. We became stronger by refusing to accept that limitations were permanent. Elena paused, looking directly at the section where the former servitor species sat. 6 months ago, the Kethvar, Velnari, Mordun, and others were trapped in a cycle of servitude that had lasted 3,000 years. They were told that serving the memory of the Eternal Ones was their nature, their purpose, their only path to meaning. She smiled at the representatives of those species. Today, the Kethvar are pioneering new forms of interspecies engineering. The Velnari are revolutionizing medical treatment across dozens of worlds. The Mordun are creating art that combines the aesthetic traditions of 17 different cultures. Elena's voice grew stronger. They didn't achieve this by accepting their limitations. They achieved it by choosing to grow beyond them. Conductor Seraph's voice suddenly filled the chamber, transmitted directly through the station's communication systems without any apparent activation from the Federation's end. Captain Rodriguez speaks passionately about growth and change, but she fails to understand the cost of such chaos. Allow me to show you what your freedom will ultimately achieve. The chamber's display shifted without anyone touching the controls, showing images that made Elena's blood run cold. Civilizations in flames, species wars that consumed entire star systems, technological disasters that rendered whole worlds uninhabitable. This is the fate of those who chose independence over unity, Conductor Seraph continued. 17 civilizations we offered to save, 17 civilizations that chose the path of individuality and chaos. All of them are now extinct. Elena felt the mood in the chamber shift as the horrible images continued. Fear began to replace hope, and she could see representatives beginning to waver. But then, Zarathul stood, their bioluminescent markings blazing with light that filled the chamber. You speak truth, Conductor, but not the whole truth. Show them what happened to the civilizations that chose to join you. The images changed, but not through any Federation technology. Zarathul was accessing systems Elena didn't even know existed, drawing on the quantum crystalline networks that their people had embedded throughout this region of space. The new images showed worlds of impossible beauty and harmony. Perfect cities, perfect beings, perfect peace. But Elena noticed something that chilled her more than the previous images of destruction. Nothing was changing. The cities remained exactly the same across what the timestamps indicated were centuries of observation. The beings moved in precisely repeated patterns. Even the art and architecture remained static. This is the fate of those who chose safety over growth, Zarathul said quietly. Not death, but something worse. Stagnation. They achieved perfection and lost the ability to become anything more. Elena saw her chance and took it. Conductor Seraph, those worlds you showed us, are they still inhabited? A pause that lasted too long. The communion represents the highest evolution of countless species. That's not what I asked. Are those worlds where your joined species originated still inhabited by living beings? Another pause. The beings who once lived on those worlds have transcended the need for physical existence. They live on as part of the greater consciousness of the communion. Elena felt her heart sink, even as she forced herself to press the advantage. So they're dead. The species you saved are extinct, just as surely as the ones who chose independence. They achieved immortality through unity. They achieved erasure through absorption. Elena's voice carried across the chamber. You're not offering us salvation, Conductor. You're offering us a choice between quick death and slow dissolution. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives began to grasp the implications. But Elena wasn't finished. There's a third option, one that you've apparently never encountered before. Elena gestured to the diverse collection of beings around her. We choose to remain ourselves while still working together. We choose to keep our independence while building something greater than any of us could achieve alone. Elena activated the chamber's displays again, showing the collaborative projects that had emerged in just the 6 months since the integration of the former servitor species. Medical breakthroughs that combined Velnari knowledge with human innovation. Engineering projects that merged Kethvar technology with Zephyrian biodesign. Cultural exchanges that were producing entirely new forms of art and literature. This is what you've never seen before, conductor. Not unity through absorption, but unity through cooperation. Not perfection through stagnation, but growth through controlled chaos. Conductor Seraph's voice returned, but now it carried a note of something Elena had never expected to hear from such a being: uncertainty. Your approach is interesting, Captain Rodriguez. But it cannot succeed in the long term. Individual species cannot maintain their independence while achieving true unity. The mathematics of social interaction make it impossible. Elena smiled. You know what humans say about impossible mathematics? We change the variables. Zarathal stepped forward, their presence suddenly filling the chamber in a way that went beyond the physical. Conductor Seraph, I offer you and your communion a choice. Remain in your perfect stagnation, or join us in something that has never been attempted before. Not the absorption of individuality into unity, but the creation of unity from individuality. Elena felt the power radiating from Zarathal and realized that the young being was no longer drawing only on their own abilities. Through their connection to her, they were accessing something uniquely human, the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. But it was more than that. Elena could sense that Zarathal was also drawing on connections to every other being in the chamber, creating a network of consciousness that maintained individual identity while sharing experience and knowledge. This is what we offer, Zarathal continued, their voice now somehow speaking directly to every mind present. Not the loss of self in service to unity, but the expansion of self through voluntary cooperation. Elena felt it then, a moment of shared consciousness where she could sense the thoughts and feelings of every being in the chamber while remaining completely herself. She experienced the universe through Veltar's senses, understood mathematics through Zephyrian biological processes, felt the deep-time perspectives of the crystal-based Altarians. But she remained Elena Rodriguez, human, stubborn, and absolutely convinced that this impossible thing could work. The moment passed, but its effects lingered. Around the chamber, representatives looked at each other with new understanding while retaining their essential nature. Impossible, Conductor Seraph whispered. Individual consciousness cannot be maintained within a true unity matrix. The feedback loops alone should have destroyed your minds. Elena laughed, the sound bright and defiant in the hushed chamber. That's the thing about humans, Conductor. We specialize in doing things that should be impossible. Zarathal nodded. And that is what makes this time different from all the others. Humanity brings something to the equation that has never existed before, the absolute refusal to choose between freedom and unity. Elena could sense that something fundamental was shifting. Through her connection to Zarathal, she felt the vast consciousness of the communion stirring with something it had never experienced, doubt about its own perfection. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, Conductor Seraph said slowly. We have seen every possible approach to the challenge of multiple species coexistence. All of them end in either destruction or absorption. There is no third path. Elena stood, feeling the weight of her species' entire history behind her words. Then, maybe it's time to create one. The Federation isn't perfect, Conductor. We still have conflicts, misunderstandings, and mistakes. But we're learning to do better, and we're doing it while staying ourselves. Elena gestured to the diverse gathering around her. Every species here brings something unique to our shared future. The Veltar brings strength and honor, the Zephyrians bring biological wisdom, the Crystal and Collective brings deep-time perspective, and humans. Elena paused, smiling. Humans bring the crazy idea that impossible just means we haven't figured out how to do it yet. Elena felt Zarathal's consciousness touch hers one more time, but now it was different. Instead of the ancient beings sharing their knowledge with her, she felt herself sharing something uniquely human with them, hope. Conductor Seraph, Elena said, I'm going to make you an offer that I suspect no one has ever made before. Instead of us joining the communion, why don't you join us? Keep your perfect worlds if you want them, but send some of your people to work with the Federation. Not to absorb us or guide us, but to learn alongside us. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. She had just invited a godlike civilization to become students instead of teachers. You would trust us with such cooperation? Conductor Seraph asked finally. Even knowing what we are capable of? Elena nodded. That's what trust means. Believing that someone can choose to be better than they have been before. Elena felt the moment hanging in balance, the future of multiple galactic civilizations waiting on the decision of beings who had never before had their certainty challenged. Finally, Conductor Seraph spoke. Captain Rodriguez, last heir Zarathul, representatives of the Federation, your proposal is unprecedented. We will need time to consider whether such cooperation is possible without compromising our essential nature. Elena smiled. Take all the time you need, Conductor. We'll be here, staying stubbornly ourselves while building something new. As the transmission ended and the chamber began to empty, Elena found herself standing with Zarathul on the observation deck, looking out at the impossible structure of the communion vessel. Do you think they'll choose cooperation over perfection? Zarathul asked. Elena considered the question. I don't know. But, I know this, for the first time in their existence, they have a choice they've never had before. And, sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. Zarathul's bioluminescent markings pulsed, and what Elena had learned was their equivalent of laughter. You humans are remarkable, you know that? You take impossible situations and somehow find ways to make them even more complicated. Elena laughed. That's our specialty. We don't just solve problems, we solve them in ways that create entirely new problems we've never had before. And, somehow, that gives me hope, Zarathul replied. Elena looked out at the stars, thinking about the choice humanity had just made. Not to accept paradise, not to resign themselves to destruction, but to insist on a third option that shouldn't exist. It was the most human thing they had ever done. 6 months later, the first communion research vessel arrived at Unity Station, its perfect beings ready to learn about the chaotic mathematics of voluntary cooperation. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be perfect. But it would be something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy, a civilization built on the principle that being different was more valuable than being right. Elena Rodriguez, captain of a maintenance ship who had stumbled into the most important discovery in galactic history, watched as representatives from hundreds of species and thousands of worlds began the slow, difficult, impossible work of building something new. The mission had been supposed to be routine. Instead, it had become the beginning of everything.